The first time I tried to talk about my dreams, I was 17 and standing behind a wobbly lectern in my high school auditorium. Graduation day at St. Peter's in Nairobi was mostly a perfunctory affair. Outside the school gates, two matatus honked and belched diesel smoke at every hour, goats scavenged behind the soccer posts. Inside, we arranged on mismatched chairs, our parents in their best shirts, their attention drifting. My palms sweated as the headmaster eyed me to begin. I had practiced the speech for weeks, late into the night, my little brother John pretending to heckle from the bottom bunk so I could keep my composure. When I looked into the sea of heavy-eyed faces, I found my mother clutching her bag, watching with nervous pride. Next to her, Auntie Mary chewed her lip, already impatient. "Our stories matter," I began, and quickly ran into trouble. 5 words in, I saw a ripple of disbelief move through the teachers. I pressed on, voice trembling. "I want to become a documentary filmmaker. For too long, people have told their stories for us. I want to." A low laugh rolled from the parent section. It wasn't cruel, just incredulous, like I'd declared I wanted to sprout wings and fly out the window. Near the back, my cousin David's voice rang out clear and careless. "Does he know those cameras cost more than this whole school?" Some kids giggled. I heard the old caretaker mutter, "Watch too many movies, eh?" It strung, but I kept speaking, my words fluttering to the scuffed wooden floor. The headmaster signaled for me to wrap it up. Later, over sodas and chapati, relatives patted my shoulder with the resigned affection reserved for hopeless cases. That day, my dream shriveled to something I carried privately, like a stone in my pocket. After graduation, Nairobi's rhythms pressed in the grind of work, the hustle for every coin. Community for us was thick as blood and twice as stifling. Even a day laborers' aspirations to steady wages were considered romantic. Uncle Samuel made it a point to mock me at every family meal. "Listen to James, he's going to be the next Al Jazeera man. Past the Sukuma Wiki superstar." I tried to find kinship in the internet cafes strung along Moir Avenue, saving shillings for half-hour sessions watching homemade documentaries from far-off places. Sometimes when I lingered too long watching foreign filmmakers set up their shots, shop owners shooed me away, assuming I was casing the joint. I scribbled story ideas on the backs of receipts and bus tickets, but I knew nothing about cameras and no one I knew had ever worked in film. I found work at a small shop near Gicomba Market, stacking bales of second-hand clothes for a sullen Italian who chain-smoked and never remembered my name. On weekends, I volunteered at a church outreach, hoping I might catch wind of an internship or at least use the borrowed camera to document street football matches. The priest, Father Michael, let me help as long as I didn't ask for money. "Someone's got to witness the day-to-day," he told me, nodding at my battered notebook. But every time my family heard I was shooting another video for free, I received the same refrain. "Cameras do not feed you," my mother said, folding laundry. "One day you will see." I nodded because fighting exhausted me, and I'd learned it was easier to play dutiful son than eternal dreamer. Nairobi never changed its face for someone like me. If you stopped walking, the city moved without you, swallowing your determination whole. But as years inched by, I built small bridges. I saved enough to buy a used Nikon with a faulty lens, hustled my way onto local news shoots, ran tea for nameless directors just to hear them talk shop. I took any gig, however menial, and learned by watching, even when my ideas were rejected outright or I was shunted to standby. One muggy afternoon, the producer for a local independent network lost his assistant days before a shoot on the city dump at Dandora. In the chaos, I ended up with the camera in my hands, no time for questioning, just a flustered nod from the boss. I filmed the scavenger women who sang while sorting waste, the bare feet of children climbing over mounds of plastic. That footage became a short piece played after the evening news, barely noticed by most. But a foreign journalist saw it and asked to meet. Her name was Lucy Ramsay. Lucy had the languid ease of someone who'd grown up around newsrooms and airports. She saw something in my eye or the way I held the camera and brought me into documentary shoots about life in Nairobi's informal settlements. I carried tripods and kept silent, learning to listen, to sit long enough that people's guard would drop and truth would slip through in half-whispered sentences. In the small circle of filmmakers, I found unlikely kin. Emmanuel, whose mother sold tomatoes outside Yaya Center, edited my first short film after hours. Ruth, just back from film school in Durban, taught me how to use light. For the first time, I stopped doubting the dream. But money was thin, rent gobbled most of my pay, and family's patience wore thinner with every year I refused to get serious and apply to the post office like cousin David. Once, after another disappointing Christmas dinner of soft ugali and hard words, my mother confronted me. "Do you want to be poor forever, James?" She was not angry, only tired, the way you get after praying one too many unanswered prayers. That night in the thin-walled flat I shared with two others, I watched rain hammer the tin roof and considered giving up. Instead, I wrote until dawn, scene after scene, stories ripped from the streets and faces I'd never see again. If nothing else, they belonged to me. In the months that followed, I filmed everything: the Matatu Crusaders holding all-night revivals, the aging boxer in Kybra who coached kids for free, the market women who worked until their hands cracked. I stitched the footage into a rough patchwork, audio mismatched, shots sometimes out of focus. I called the documentary "We Carry This City." When I finished, I used my last 1,000 shillings to rent a tiny room and borrowed a black bedsheet for a screen. Emmanuel set up the projector atop a pile of bricks. 50 people came, most of them my friends, a few curious kids. A journalist for the Standard happened by, more interested in the samosas than the film. But the next day she wrote a tiny column: "Nairobi tells its story at grassroots screening." Lucy forwarded the review to her contacts. 2 months later, I was shortlisted for a grant from an international film foundation. I didn't tell my family. There had been too many false starts. The night I got the email saying I'd won, I sat quietly in the blue glow of my ancient laptop, not elated, only steady, like someone finally allowed to exhale after years underwater. The foundation offered not only money but also mentorship, equipment, the chance to shoot a feature-length film of my own vision. I called Emmanuel and Ruth, my hands shaking so badly I dropped the phone. From there, my life moved at unnerving speed. I left my job at the clothes shop. We formed a tiny crew from the same circle of overlooked talent. The grant allowed me to pay everyone, if modestly, and my mother stopped nagging only because I finally sent mobile money for her medicine. My project took shape in the alleys and open-air kitchens of Nairobi's Eastlands. I focused on the hidden musicians, boys who made guitars from scrap metal, gospel choirs in the shadow of power lines, a blind Mbira player whose songs filled 3 minutes on local radio, but whose story bristled with pain and persistence. I filmed for a year. I traveled to Mombasa, to Kisumu, gathering fragments of the Kenyan soundscape. Sometimes I thought of giving up, weighed down by the enormity of doing justice to the people who trusted me with their lives. There were setbacks. Ruth lost her father and left the country. Emmanuel's camera was stolen. We rebuilt, switched to borrowed gear, reshot what we lost. Each step was a test, but by now my suffering had a rhythm: pain, adjust, move again. When the final version of Music Made Us was accepted to the Nairobi Documentary Film Festival, I let myself hope, if only for that 1 week. The promotion was modest. My name was on the poster in tiny letters beneath bigger foreign names. But when I went to the Sunday screening, the lines snaked out the door: musicians in faded shirts, old friends, a few relatives who'd finally heard I was doing something real, though they mostly came for the food. I stood in the back as the projector whirred to life, my hands itching with anticipation, fear, and somewhere deep the old hurt. For 90 minutes my city filled the screen, the chords, cacophonies, and quiet heartbreaks of our streets. When the credits rolled, there was silence, then a slow, gathering applause. I dared to feel something close to joy. That night, a French producer approached me with a business card and the easy promises I'd learned not to trust. But when the emails and offers kept coming, something shifted. Invitations to festivals followed: Accra, Tunis, even Berlin. I traveled, always with a return ticket, always anchored to something homespun. My family followed the news secondhand, in the clipped, cautious way of people waiting for the other shoe to drop. Even as the awards followed, first a regional TV award, then a grant to produce a series for a large broadcaster, they did not ask, only nodded politely, as if wary of jinxing my fortune. My mother never left Nairobi, insisting that she was too old for flights. Still, when I returned after my first European trip and brought her a shawl, she touched it like a relic. The years rolled over, the dream now had shape. Yet every time I visited home and found myself sitting at the rickety table with relatives, laughter inevitably rose when the talk turned to ambition. Cousin David, promotion-hungry and newly bald, would still smirk: "James is going to win an Oscar next year." The old taunt, softened now by the fact of my small successes. Despite it all, I still longed for something greater than headlines or international applause, a kind of homecoming that could silence that adolescent hurt, if only for a moment. It seemed childish, but the ache never left. That moment finally arrived 7 years after my first speech was cut short. Nairobi was hosting a traveling international film showcase, and one of my documentaries, now well circulated, was on the marquee. The festival arranged a screening within St. Peter's High School, linking the event to community outreach. When the invitation came to show my work, I hesitated, remembering the brittle laughter at my expense, but I agreed. Something in me needed the return. When I arrived at the school, the surrounding streets looked smaller than before, the market's dust less menacing. The school had repainted the walls a garish yellow. Outside, boys in blue sweaters chased each other across the cracked pavement. Teachers, older now, gestured for the students to file into the auditorium. Inside, just as years ago, rows of flimsy chairs awaited, but this time the audience included not only teenagers but also a scattering of teachers, my mother in her Sunday kitenge, Auntie Mary in starched white, David fiddling with his phone, and even Uncle Samuel, wheezing as he settled in the front row. The headmaster, still stern, now older, welcomed the crowd, giving an introduction that I only half heard. I waited behind the black curtain, heartbeat thumping in my throat. At the appointed time, I stepped out. Silence filled the hall. It was not reverent, just expectant, curiosity worn by the years. I cleared my throat. "Thank you all for inviting me home," I said. "You may recall a boy who wanted to make films. Some of you thought that was foolish. Maybe you were right to be skeptical. Today I'd like to show you not my dream but our stories, how far they've come." No one laughed, the lights dimmed. On screen the opening shot swept in. Nairobi's skyline at dawn, purple oranges brushing the city awake. The voices of ordinary people carried the story, market traders, buskers, street poets, each frame rendered with care, their dignity on display. I did not sit. Instead, I watched the faces before me, my mother's hands clenched in her lap, Auntie Mary's eyes shining with the smallest tear, David sitting up, phone forgotten. Even Uncle Samuel for once fell quiet. When the film ended, applause thundered, not only polite but genuine, erupting from teachers and students alike. For the first time, my name was called not as punchline, but as one of achievement, whispered with something like pride. The headmaster shook my hand. "You did not give up," he said, and his words settled in my chest, warm as a benediction. Afterward, people crowded the aisles, pressing hands to mine, asking questions. Some students wanted to know how to become filmmakers. Others simply wanted to thank me for showing themselves on the screen. An older teacher cornered me by the dusty trophy case. "You have showed us something we could not see ourselves. Forgive us for our doubts, you've honored us all." In the courtyard, my mother stood by the painted wall, a gentle, trembling smile on her lips. When I neared, she pressed her hands to my face as if I was still a boy. "I am proud of you, James," she whispered, and for once I believed her utterly. Later, walking home through streets feathered with jacaranda blossoms and market chaos, I felt the old pain lift at last. I had not conquered the world. I did not need to. In returning, I had reclaimed the place that first wounded me, now reshaped by persistence. The city itself felt different, as if I could breathe its air deeper, walk its roads lighter. I passed by cousins and neighbors who greeted me not with laughter, but with the muted awe reserved for someone who had left and brought back proof of the possible. And in that moment, illuminated by dusk, I finally understood. My story was never about proving anyone wrong, it was about insisting the story could be told at all.